Broadcasting to you from somewhere deep in the heart of Texas. Once again, it's me, honey. Yeah. Hi. How's everybody doing? Hope well. I'm going to be picking up where I left off. Okay. Let me look at this one. Okay. All right. So the coming of Messiah and 2nd Ezra's. Okay. Let me make sure I've got it on. Okay. I'm going to make sure everything's set up right. Okay. So the book of 2nd Ezra's especially contains a massive amount of revelation style prophecy that we highlight throughout. However, as it deals with the creation to the time of Messiah, all the way to the end times, this prophetic book proceeds and becomes the origin of many of the concepts of Revelation in the New Testament. John saw a vision, and it matched what he already read in 2nd Ezra's in large detail. For Ezra knew when Messiah would arrive, and even his name. So 728. For my son Yahusha, for my son Yahusha shall be revealed with those that be with him, and they that remain shall rejoice within 400 years. I'm putting my glasses on. I found them. Yay. That way I don't sound so funny when I'm reading. Okay, so Ezra lived about 400 BC, which places the coming of Messiah's birth around 0 BC, which is the most accurate prophecy of such. He then tells us his name would be called Yahusha. Again, this is a problem for Judaism, who would then have to produce a Messiah named Yahusha in that era, of which they had none. This is why this book was censored by them, and they remain ignorant of its concepts, as well as the only Messiah named Yahusha, whom they rejected. Then Ezra further identifies Messiah's death, that all men may have life. And we know this well from the New Testament and some prophecies of the Old. But this is exact and specific like no other. Ezra the prophet knew these things. 729. After these years shall my son Messiah die, and all men that have life. So Ezra saw the vision of Messiah then ascending into heaven, as well as his second coming. This too is a major conundrum for Judaism, who cannot produce anyone. 1332. And the time shall be when these things shall come to pass, and the signs shall happen which I showed you before. And then shall my son be declared, whom you saw as a man ascending. So following these incredible prophecies, Ezra elaborates on the role of Messiah in his second coming. Once again, Judaism has nothing to offer in these regards. So the Son of Elohim being confessed in the world, after 7 days the world will be raised up, mass resurrection of those who are asleep, the judgment seat, evil will disappear, and the road to salvation is a narrow gate, few are saved. The Garden of Eden and Tree of Life are opened in the end. He is not willing that any should perish. The signs of the end times and origin of Matthew 24 in part. The line of Judah, of Yehuda, will consume the final empire, consuming his enemies with fire from his mouth. The lost tribes return. Every eye shall see him, handing out crowns and giving palms. Okay. So the transition from the Old Testament to the New is fully defined in Ezra's and Qumran, Beth Abara community of exiled temple Levite priests. There's no gap, and Revelation is not a book of new concepts, but originates largely in theology from Ezra's. Excuse me. So Messiah is all over these books, and yet we are taught not to read them. This is what we call Dark Age Theology. Anyone who ever tells you you cannot read something is teaching censorship, not discernment. The church, or really ecclesia in the Bible, is to teach discernment instead, and we are all to prove all things. 1 Thessalonians 5:21 for ourselves. Okay, so Messiah Let's see here. Messiah begins his discourse in Matthew 24 with, "Take heed that no man deceive you." And he then lays out the end that Ezra defined 400 years earlier, or Torah Test will vet this date content. Okay. So precise prophecy revealed 400 years before his birth. John the Baptist in Qumran, he likely grew up there. I read about this yesterday. Yeah, I'm going to skip it a little bit. Get to where I need to start. Okay, so here's where I was. So the Torah Test. Our first and second Ezra scripture inspired in canon. Criteria set forth by Blue Letter Bible with our additions. Okay, so I have read this yesterday too. The Prophetic Authorship and Acceptance and Quoted Doctrine. Okay. Okay, so hey, Roots Magoo, how are you? I think we finished yesterday, right here where it's at the introduction with prophetic authorship, who wrote First and Second Ezra's, and when. Do you recall that as well? I don't want to just keep repeating myself. Okay, so First and Second Ezra's both identify their writer as the prophet Ezra, or in Latin, Esdras as an eyewitness or relating a fairly recent era in his time around 400 BC. And it does not do so in speculation, but even identifies the exact Ezra to whom it refers with detailed lineage. You okay? You okay? Shim? Yeah. You all right, Shimmy? Shim? You okay, baby? Oh, hang on just a second. You having a hard time, baby? There you go. Okay, Shim? All right? Let's see, baby. Get it off your nose. I get it. Let me see this. There you go, baby. There you go. Okay. Get out, Tifa. Oh, goodness. Got some more. Let's see. Let's see. All right, baby. Okay. Oh, my. All right. Sorry about that. So it doesn't do so in speculation, but even identifies the exact Ezra to whom it refers with detailed lineage. In modern scholarly circles, many hold to the paradigm that somehow those in Qumran just wrote whatever they wanted and called it scripture, claiming they wrote it in the name of a prophet and fraud. The fact that they do not even realize that they are undermining the actual Levite temple priest who cared for and curated scripture with their very lives demonstrates the paradigm is illiterate, and the biblical keepers of scripture up until the time of Messiah, they didn't write scripture arbitrarily. They kept it. They kept copying it over for many centuries in order to preserve it. So the prophet would typically employ the assistance of the Levite scribe to write his words down, but they didn't just make up whatever they wanted, nor add it, nor wait centuries to write. So that is not established and irresponsible. And it's certainly not scholarly to claim that they just made up texts and attributed them to the prophets just because they wanted to teach the people a lesson. This would undermine their authority in every sense, and such practice is not recorded anywhere among the temple priests, nor would it be acceptable in any sense then nor today. So it's unthinkable anyone calling themselves a scholar would even enter such false paradigm. And this demonstrates, a disrespect from the scholarly community, for scripture and its writers and keepers. If a text says Ezra or Moses wrote it, then either they wrote it at most with the assistance of a scribe, or the whole thing is a lie. I read this yesterday. I read all this yesterday, so I'm going to skip down a little bit. So, in fact, the original authorized 1611 King James Version even anchors Messiah's words to 2nd Ezra's that we will cover. We had a pastor argue on this, sending us the page from his copy. It goes on and says that he cut part of it out. I read about this yesterday too. Okay. Trying to find out where exactly I left off. I should have been a little bit more organized, but you know me, hot mess. Okay, so I'm wanting to say, I didn't read this stuff here, right here. Okay, so first Ezra's in the Dead Sea Scrolls. In the Dead Sea Scrolls, we find what appears a misrepresentation on yet another topic from those controlling these narratives. We already found they defrauded Essenes into the story, in a literate fashion in which they should be embarrassed. Not a single reference is found to the Essenes in any literature in Qumran, but they call themselves Aaronic Levite priests, the sons of Aaron, the sons of Zadok, the very temple priests exiled by the Pharisees, modern rabbis who control the illiterate narrative today. There is no archaeology, not one piece, and no history supporting Qumran as the Essene headquarters. But both the Essene find in archaeology and historic placement by Pliny, the only one to do so, located them in En-Gedi, 25 miles south, not Qumran. Worse, Qumran is a new Muslim name, and shouldn't Israel be restoring the biblical name to this area? We prove in the introduction of this book that Qumran has an ancient name of the oldest map of Israel, the Maraba tile map showing Bethabara as Qumran, supported by several maps over the centuries, all the way up to 1901. But somehow, between 1901 and 1947, the name was lost and forgotten in willing ignorance. In fact, Messiah was baptized there in Freshwater Springs. Okay, I read that yesterday too. Okay, so first, the so labeled Proto-Esther fragment reads, "The Most High, whom you Jews fear and worship, rules over the whole earth. Everyone whom he wishes comes near Bagasro. Whoever speaks an evil word against Bagasro will be put to death, for there is no one to destroy his good forever." Proto-Esther. Okay. So let us begin with the Most High title for the Elohim of Yehudia. Esther never mentions the title once. However, King Darius himself uses the title Most High to refer to Yahuwah in First Ezra's in a similar decree more fitting to this fragment. First Ezra 6:31 through 33, Darius refers to Yehudia's God as Most High. Esther does not. The offerings may be made to the Most High Elohim for the King Darius and his children, and they may pray for their lives. And he commanded that whosoever should transgress, yes, or make light of anything forespoken or written out of his own house, should a tree be taken, and he therein be hanged, and all his goods seized for the king. Yahuwah, therefore, whose name is there called upon, utterly destroy every king and nation that stretches out his hand to hinder or damage that house of Yahuwah in Jerusalem. I, Darius the king, have ordained that according unto these things be done with diligence. So the Most High, as the reference to Yahuwah, is used regularly 29 times throughout First and Second Ezra's. In this case, by Darius himself, as a well-established precedent, matching the fragment, as this is a decree from a king. It's never used even once in the book of Esther, nor is Yahuwah used even once, nor is there a single reference to him in any of Esther. So we do not find Esther giving Yahuwah credit for any of her story. And even the fasting portion is also a pagan practice of the Persians that does not specifically even identify which religion she even represented. Her entire story is one of a supposed Jewess who slept her way to gaining influence as a concubine, not a queen initially, which is also greatly misinterpreted in the recent movie One Night with the King, retelling Esther based on these fragments, claiming Esther just read to the king. No, she slept with him, and the reading of the law he requests much later, not on the evening in which he slept with her outside of marriage. This fragment appears to be stretched away from First Ezra's, where it's far more likely a match to that story than that of Esther. Excuse me. In fact, those wishing to try to force this fragment as a Ataxerxes, I can't ever say his name right, era in the time of Ezra and Esther both. In Esther, no one ever uses Most High, but in First Ezra's, even Ataxerxes, I don't know, himself uses Most High for Yahuwah, for that matter. He was fully aware of this people, their laws, and their God, yet we find the writer of Esther clearly was not. Esther Esther misrepresents all three and demonstrates a complete ignorance of Yahuwah, scripture in both biblical and Persian history. And it's difficult to imagine how anyone would defend a book. Oh, gosh. I don't know why my mouse gives me such a hard time. Okay. Okay. Would defend a book, clearly not Bible in any sense, and very obviously a Pharisee, origin, as it was not kept by the temple priest in Qumran, nor the New Testament. Thus, it was not in the Bible. Only the Pharisees propagated in, which appears to originate with Josephus at the end of the first century. Maybe he wrote that fiction. Certainly no prophet nor biblical scribe did. So First Ezra is 8:19-21. And I, King Ataxerxes, how do you say it? You know what? It's bugging me. I'm fixing to look up how to say that word because I've spoken about him so much, and I've totally botched his name. I'm gonna get this right now. Okay, Google, how do you pronounce Ataxerxes?
That's pronounced Ataxer.
Oh. Okay, Google, how do you pronounce Ataxerxes?
Here's some results from the web.
Okay, Google, how do you pronounce
That's pronounced at.
No. How do you pronounce Artaxere? Wait, I said it. Okay, wait. There it is. Okay. How do you pronounce this?
Name, so make sure to stay tuned to the channel. How do you say it? Artaxerxes.
Thank you. Artaxerxes. I got it, y'all.
So make sure to stay tuned to the channel.
Artaxerxes. Okay. And I, King Artaxerxes, I know I was saying Ataxerxes. Oh my God. And I, King Artaxerxes, have also commanded the keepers of the treasures of Syria and Phoenicia that whatsoever Ezra the priest and the reader of the law of the Most High Elohim shall send for, they should give to him with speed 20. Okay. To the sum of 100 talents of silver, likewise also of wheat, even to 100 cores, and 100 pieces of wine, and other things in abundance. Let all things be performed after the law of Elohim diligently unto the Most High Elohim, that wrath come not upon the king of his sons. Okay, so I guess my mic was muted. Lovely. So that was what, 6 whole minutes of my mic being muted? Yay, go me. All right, I'm gonna get something to drink. Hang on a second. Okay, so basically all that was just argument that Esther can't be factual. So it can't be Esther in either sense, as Artaxerxes was not seeking the scroll of his father. He was seeking his own scroll from his recent reign, even. The scroll would not have been decreed by his father in any sense, but by him. So there would likely be no mention of Darius' son, as first Ezra's records that specific decree to continue temple construction, which doesn't have the same language or have such language. Even worse for Esther is that the timing of her story also begins with her being made queen later in this same 7th year, in which Ezra already returned and with many lost tribes in the final mass migration. So why did Esther not return as well? Why did she, along with Mordecai, even remain in Persia? In fact, Artaxerxes well knew who the Jews, the Yahudim were, had a good relationship with them, and even loved Ezra. In fact, he signed a decree allowing all of Judea to return before Esther was taken into his palace in her story. However, we're supposed to believe that king forget what a Hebrew was 5 years later and decided to play along with the mafia racket for money when he gave to the temple and supported Judea with protection, including a decree for them to restore the same law to their people that supposedly Haman now convinced him to hate, nonsense. The timeline is clearer. Cyrus decrees the second temple to be built. The southern kingdom begins to return at that time in part, and they begin construction on the second temple. Then the Samaritans, the true enemy of Israel, who will attack them in 165 BC, defiling the temple successfully, petition against the rebuilding, and the project is placed on hold under Cambyses, Ahasuerus, who is misunderstood as Artaxerxes, grandson of Darius the first by many. He cannot be, as the temple is completed under Darius, so its construction cannot be halted under his grandson 2 generations after it was already built. Thus, no one needs a scholar to wave their wand here for that era. Artaxerxes, in this story, when temple construction was halted in Cambyses by his Chaldean name, period, both in Ezra and in First Ezra's, he has to be the real Artaxerxes, grandson of Darius. The first does not appear until later in Ezra's final return. So that king is actually the same one from the story of Esther, but Esther has a major challenge. We know it is firmly the same king Artaxerxes as Esdras, as his palace was in Shushan, Susan, which was not moved until the days of Darius I. Thus, this cannot be the son of Cyrus, who bore a similar Chaldean name. He was earlier. We are to believe this same Artaxerxes who loved Ezra, who served him as a priest in Persia, much like Daniel, had a very poor memory. He decrees for Ezra's protection and return to Jerusalem with thousands of lost tribes from the southern kingdom. He even previously clarified to Ezra all who wished to return there had his permission to do so. So Ezra's migration and return with lost tribes begins in Artaxerxes' 7th year of reign in the 1st month, and they arrive in the 5th month. So Ezra and the final wave of Yehudim returned to Jerusalem, left Babylon, Abib, 1st month, March, April, 7th year of Artaxerxes. Okay, in the 7th year of the reign of King Artaxerxes, in the 5th month, this was the king's 7th year. For they went from Babylon in the 1st day of the 1st month, and came to Jerusalem according to the prosperous journey which Yahuwah gave them. For Ezra had very great skill, so that he omitted nothing of the law and commandments of Yahuwah. He taught all Israel the ordinances and judgments. King Artaxerxes unto Ezra the priest and reader of the law of Yahuwah sent greeting, having determined to deal graciously. I have given order that such of a nation of the Yahudim and the priests and Levites, being within our realm, as are willing and desirous, should go with you unto Jerusalem. So Esther's story beginning sleeps with Artaxerxes to Beth, 10th month, and the 7th year of Artaxerxes, 9 months later. So Esther was taken into King Ahasuerus into his house, royal in the 10th month, which is the month Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign. So let us break this down. Ahasuerus is Artaxerxes' grandson of Darius the First in this narrative for both. These are the same era of his reign, even the same year, the 7th year. Ezra and the lost tribes leave Babylon, Persia, that year in the 1st month. Abib. Okay, so Esther's story had begun as she was in the king's harem at that time, preparing to meet him. She would not be brought to the king until the 10th month of the same year. However, she began with preparation 1 year prior. We read about that before. So now, when every maid's turn was come to go into the king Ahasuerus, after that she had been 12 months. So let us not forget, though, that Esther was brought into a concubine. She was brought in as a concubine. This is not the story of a virtuous woman, nor one who ever acknowledges Yahuwah and his practices, nor keeps such, as there is no mention of Sabbath and not a single mention of Yahweh, even once in her entire story. Her story even adds a feast day of Purim, which has no biblical foundation nor track. This is not scripture nor accurate in history. In the evening she went, and on the morrow she returned into the second house of the woman, to the custody of Shashgaz, the king's chamberlain, which kept the concubines. Did Artaxerxes know at the point what a Hebrew was? What they looked like even? Of course he did. Did they look like Persians? Not according to scripture, as they would be dark-skinned. Artaxerxes, however, would be from Japheth, or white-skinned, as his grandfather was, Darius the Mede, from Media, or the lineage of Madai, who likely stole that land from Shem. It certainly is odd that the two encroachers from Jubilees, Canaan and Madai, continue to enter the narrative, or at least the lands in which they stole. David was ruddy, meaning red or medium brown. And Solomon's countenance or skin tone was medium brown as cedars. Some of the southern kingdom were even considered black, as Yahuwah married a Canaanite from Ham, likely black as well as having a child with Tamar or of Aram, likely medium brown. Hebrews generally are not white in scripture, and that is another false paradigm, thus upon unwilling ignorance. Was he fully aware of who they were as a people? Not only was he aware, he decreed them return and demanded Syria and Phoenicia pay tribute to their temple in Jerusalem. So Mordecai and Esther should no longer even be in Persia, for that matter. The fact that they are there, if even true, demonstrates they are not worshiping Yahuwah. In fact, Ezra gathered the people, all them that were in captivity, into Jerusalem. One could attempt to say this was just those who had returned, perhaps, but this appears to tell us that all returned at that point in the final migration. Anyone who did not was not serving Yahuwah, and Esther's story takes place after this. There was a proclamation in all Jewry in Jerusalem to all them that were of the captivity, that they should be gathered together at Jerusalem, and that whosoever met not there within 2 or 3 days, according as the elders that bear rule appointed, their cattle should be seized to the use of the temple, and himself cast out from them that were of the captivity. And in 3 days were all they of the tribe of Judah and Benjamin gathered together at Jerusalem the 12th day of the 9th month. So Ezra tells them that anyone not coming to Jerusalem within 2 to 3 days, meaning they were already there or near, would be cast out of and their cattle seized for use in the temple within 3 days. All they of Yehuda and Benjamin were in Jerusalem. Again, one can attempt that this only means those who returned, yet it certainly seems to reference this was the final migration, and at this point during Artaxerxes' time, and before Esther was even brought into the king's palace the first time. Yehudiah already returned. In addition, the text appears to remain in that same year as this progression, and this is the 9th month of the 7th year of Artaxerxes, which is still a month before Esther is even taken into the king's palace in Persia. So, if this is the case, then Esther was not likely a Yehudim, nor was Mordecai, but likely impostors, whom Ezra even identifies as usurpers of the priesthood, even attempting to mix into Yehudiah's return, pretending to be Yehudim, but they were not. That sounds like Revelation 2:9 and 3:9 and Messiah's rebuke of the synagogue of Satan, Pharisees, Persians. All right, I'm going to stop right there. I've been going on for a minute. My eyes are tired, so I'll pick it back up tomorrow. Sorry you couldn't hear me for a minute. And then I'll pick this up again tomorrow. God willing, I'm still around. I fell last night, right on the concrete, on my knees. Boy, I'm in a lot of pain today. But I always fall at least once a year with my disability. At least once a year I have a good tumble. So I'm going to have to recover from that now. It's always something. But anyway, I'll catch you on the next one. Bye-bye.